Do you have time for a scam, a swindle, a con? What about a story about one of the most prolific con women in British history?
This is a story about long cons, but we're all short on time, so let's preview it and let you know if it's worth your while.
It's time to preview the Global Originals podcast, Filthy Rituals, on this episode of So Much Crime, So Little Time.
Welcome to So Much Crime, So Little Time. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Dee. In this episode, we'll introduce you to the Global Originals podcast, Filthy Rituals.
If you haven't listened to Filthy Rituals, that's perfect. This is one of our preview episodes, so we'll only talk about the first episode, and there are no spoilers for what's to come.
In our next episode, we'll discuss the whole series.
But right now, we just want to decide if this is a crime that's worth your time.
After we preview Filthy Rituals, we have a related true crime question of the show.
But first, let's go get scammed in England.
So, what is Filthy Rituals all about?
The podcast is hosted by Hannah McGuire and Sruthi Bala. They are the hosts of another true crime podcast called Red-Handed. Filthy Rituals was released in 2023.
It's the story of Juliette de Souza. She was one of the most prolific con artists in British history.
So the podcast moves between Hampstead, which is a wealthy London suburb, and Suriname in South America.
There are 6 episodes, each about 45 minutes long. Okay, let's discuss. Tell me, Jeff, what were your initial thoughts?
Well, this was kind of a different one from what we've listened to. I actually had a little bit of trouble getting into it at first. I feel like there's kind of a lot of prologue before it gets to the story. What did you think?
I mean, first of all, there was no murder.
Sure.
And yeah, I kind of agree. I feel like in a way, there was a lot of setting the scene.
Yeah.
Which in a way was nice, but then it was wasteful, I felt. Unless in the next 5 episodes it's going to become really important that we know what an English manor or fancy English house looks like and how they serve their afternoon tea.
There was a lot about tea. Yeah.
There was a lot about tea. And I love tea. I'm Irish. We love a cuppa.
I mean, I also love tea. And a good fancy English house. I guess I love that less than tea, but yeah, it took a little bit. We kind of wound through a few different people before we got to the main focus of the story, which is this guy Keith Bender, and then of course Juliette de Souza, who's the one at the kind of the center of the story. But yeah, it takes a little while to get there. But I don't know. Once we got there, I think Keith was a pretty interesting character. Yeah, what did you make of Keith?
Keith, I don't know. I'm struggling with this one. I feel like as you started off by saying like, look, it didn't grab you. It wasn't like pulling you in the way previous podcasts that we have reviewed or previewed have. It didn't pull me in. And Keith, when he was introduced, I don't know whether it was him, whether it was his accent, whether it was his naivety or the consistent decisions that silly decisions that he made, but he didn't get me. Maybe I didn't find him relatable, but now I feel like I should have, because like he's married. It was a married couple with like young kids, lots of things going on. That should be relatable to me. But then I was wondering whether it was the hosts. Like, was it the way they depicted him? Maybe he wasn't depicted in a way that I felt was that intriguing.
How so?
So I don't know. The hosts, in our last episodes, we were discussing the host of The Thing About Pam with his silky smooth voice and how we were just like lulled in by him. And like, it took me a while to get used to him as well. But the jury is out on the hosts of this show. Part of me thought that they were slightly disrespectful of the people involved in the story, particularly Keith. Yeah. It seemed a little bit like they were laughing maybe at his decisions that he made. But then I know I know they probably weren't, but then I was also thinking maybe it turns out he's complicit in like a lot of the story, which we haven't seen yet. Like maybe in how it unravels, he's actually not like this good like figure in it.
Which we don't know yet, right? Like,
which we don't know yet. So just to give that backstory, like he's set up as basically patient zero in this case,
right.
where he's the first one that was majorly scammed by Juliet D'Souza, and he actually like more or less reels in some other people, their clients of his. He's a, what is he again?
He's an osteopath.
Osteopath.
Yeah.
I have orthopedics in my head, and then I had a chiropractor in my head, and I just needed to, okay, so I don't know.
Do you find
it was slow?
Well, I think you could say the same thing about the last one we talked about, the thing about Pam, where there's a little bit of like kind of snarky commentary from the host about the story, but not about the victim.
I think they did a really good job. I think they have a good dynamic, the two hosts together. And I feel like maybe as I go through the episodes, maybe I'll warm to them, and maybe, you know, I'll kind of see things shine through a bit more.
But who are who are we supposed to relate to in this, right? Like I think the hosts are a little bit detached. I do think, like, I agree that I may warm to them more over time. I think they're engaging, like they're professional hosts. But yeah, Keith he's a little detached, right? Like he's a little aloof. Yeah, like I feel like in other stories there's a little bit more of like an immediate person to sort of latch on to. And I mean, it is also true that no one gets murdered. So how much of that, like how much is that a factor, do you think?
I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and a lot of podcasts grab me, even when there's no corpse involved. So like, I kind of half jokingly say that like I'm only interested if there is a murder, but like, I feel like, I don't know. And there was parts of it, like I have to say, that I really enjoyed. Like I did enjoy hearing about Maria, the unlikely hero who has the secret talent of a DIY investigator. I was immediately, so she is like an older lady, and that's where they're having their afternoon tea at the start in her like fancy house. Immediately with that line, I thought of the Thursday Murder Club, which is a book that we've read in book club, and I'm like, oh my god, this, like, I want to hear more from her.
Which I think we're gonna, but right? Like I presume we're gonna.
I hope so. It feels like it's been set up for the main person that we need to hear from is Keith, and maybe that's why I didn't like it. I feel like in previous podcasts that we've listened to, there's been more variety of the people that we're hearing from, whereas here it's just mainly Keith is speaking. It's not like they're interviewing him. It's like he's been interviewed, they're taking clips, and they're diagnosing what he's saying. So maybe that is, as you said, like why it feels kind of detached, slightly cold maybe, and slightly judgmental, as opposed to hearing the interaction between them and Keith.
Right, because we don't hear from Juliet. And the other key character we're introduced to is Sylvia Eves, who was the opera singer and one of the main victims, but she's not available. She died already, so not murdered. Just
I mean, I will say she is the one person who grabbed me. Like, I want the story of like riches to rags, it seems, from because of her interactions with presumably Keith, but definitely Juliet D'Souza. That is really intriguing to me, because my heart broke immediately as I heard that. Like, she was just like a kind woman from all accounts, who was trying to be helpful, who enjoyed singing, teaching singing after like being a famous actress or whatever, or opera singer. She was intriguing, and I don't know, I'm just wondering about the focus of this podcast. Like, how is it going to focus in the next few episodes? So yeah, I'm kind of between that and then the other aspect. Like, there was a few little tidbits that I was like, oh, that's relatable. As I said, like, Maria reminded me of Thursday Murder Club. It's obviously like an older woman thing. I'm like, oh my god, they're so cool. The other thing is, like, I did enjoy hearing about the Amazon rainforest,
Yeah.
but I think that's maybe something, like, I've been to the Amazon rainforest, but on the Bolivian side. So I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. Of course you would say it. It's probably the one decision that Keith made. For context, Juliet D'Souza, part of her like ruse on Keith was like, come to the Amazon rainforest. It'll help you like cleanse. You'll get to meet like a shaman and blah, blah, blah. I mean, of all his decisions, I'm like, yes, always say yes to a trip to South America. Like, of course you do. So,
if some woman said, let's go to Suriname to the jungle to meet a shaman, you would say, of course, definitely.
I mean, I wouldn't say no, but if someone said to me, put like whatever amount of cash in an envelope so that I can send it to the Suriname rainforest so they can pin it to a tree and that like your wish or whatever will come true, I will say no to that. But like going on an adventure over to the Amazon rainforest, like what? Like it's still my favorite place I've ever been.
Why
So
why
of
is it
course
your
I would
favorite
say
place
yes.
you've ever been?
Oh my God, it's magical. It's really, really magical.
How so?
A lot of stories. I also related to the host saying she was allergic to mosquito bites. I think I got maybe like 80 mosquito bites while I was there. Like it was wild.
You didn't cover yourself head to
Wild.
toe like Keith did?
No, I made some ill choices in my wardrobe. I had shorts on one day and I just got absolutely ravaged. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Okay.
So I could relate to these little pieces, but I just feel overall, I don't know.
What do you think about so he's an osteopath, so I had to look that up. And do you know anything about osteopaths?
All that was in my head was a chiropractor.
I think they're similar. Maybe someone knows better would disagree with that, but I feel like it's similarly like sort of on the fringe of like Western medicine, right? Like it's, I feel like chiropractors kind of have this reputation of like, is it real? Is it made up? Like, does it actually help? Maybe. I don't know. It's sort of looked down upon by some other medical fields. And I mean, the fact that Keith goes from being an osteopath to being into other forms of alternative medicine, like the shamanism, but also like crystals and things like that. Like, I think that opens up maybe a different element of like, who is this guy and like what, like how willing am I to go along with him on this journey?
Yeah, I think that goes back to the like how I feel like it's a bit unrelatable and like, look, I'm all for alternative medicines. I've no problem with them. I think a lot of them can bring great healing to people, the like of acupuncture, chiropractor. Like I've been there, done that. There's a lot of benefits that I see from it. But I think turning your back on alternative medicine is very similar to turning your back on Western medicine. Like, don't do it. Later, when he's diagnosed with, now I say diagnosed, I'm doing my air quotes again, with cancer by Juliet,
Right.
he does not seek a medical diagnosis. He does not seek medical treatment. And like, this whole like, okay. The other thing that I'm just like, no, I can't deal with. The electrocrystal therapy.
Yeah. Measuring your chakra energy.
Okay. And look, I've heard about chakras and stuff. Again, I'm always open to these kind of things. But there's one thing in particular about Keith's story. Maybe the person who did this therapy on him and checked out his chakras would have a different outlook on it. Maybe if I spoke to them, I'd be able to get a bit more knowledge on it. But giving like being like, oh, there's a dark area over the lower abdomen of a man. Okay. This is the easiest option I've ever seen. Like if you want to be like, let's convince him that there's something wrong. How many options can you go with there? It's his lower abdomen. What could be there? Is he getting, maybe he likes sex too much. Maybe he's like trying to get out of like having sex with too many people. Maybe he doesn't like it at all, or he's not getting it enough. And that's another option. Maybe he's got some sort of sexual dysfunction going on. Maybe he's ill. Like there are so many options here. Like I am like, it's the easiest thing to be like, put that in his head. And eventually at some stage in the near future, he's going to have some sort of issue with it.
Right.
Maybe he has a bad like experience with a woman or a man or a partner that he is unhappy with. Then he looks back and he's like, my chakras were dark in that area. Like that felt like the easy get.
Well, and we're getting into sort of the con here, right? Of like, let's find this guy who is super vulnerable, right? Like he's just gone through this traumatic experience with his wife. His wife was an alcoholic. The marriage ended. He lost so he moved out of his house, and then he was living with his parents, and then he lost that place. He's trying to just like work out of a van or something, like do remote osteopathy. Is that the word? Whatever.
Sounds accurate.
And so he's kind of at like a serious like life crisis, desperation moment. And like, I imagine he's very susceptible to this.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, like in most cons you see, it's like the people who are most vulnerable who, you know, get that. Like he said himself, like his wife had an addiction to alcohol.
Yeah.
And what he said was when your partner is suffering with an addiction, you become very isolated because you don't really want to face up to other people around you that this is happening. And so I understand that, and I have such empathy for that. Like that is truly such a horrible, like terrible experience. So I understand like he's isolated. He just seems very blasé about it or something. I don't know. And maybe that's the other unrelatable thing. I'm like, you've gone through such a hard time, and it just feels like you're like, I don't know. Even his description of the Amazon rainforest, and I brought my trunks. I was like, I don't know. I was just like, this is so. I just have no connection there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, what do you think?
Sorry to Keith for my terrible impersonation.
I mean, it was like he was right here with us. I think it was uncanny. So I feel like so far this has been sort of a mix of like, there's things that have maybe turned you off about this story and things that have pulled you in. What, like, I guess, like, how eager are you to keep going?
Okay, this is hard for me as well. Our aim here is to use this as a book club, but for podcast. So I suppose I'm trying to answer it as if I was just chatting to you in our podcast club. If we weren't doing this, I don't think I would continue. I don't think when I pick up my phone, I put my headphones in, I'm going for a run or a walk, or I'm in the car, I'd be saying, I want to listen to that. And that happens sometimes, the odd time with me. My hope is same with book club. What I like about book club and what we're trying to provide here is like an opportunity for us to be like, actually, I was wrong. Like, it was actually unbelievable. Like, listen the whole way through. And I really hope that when I listen to the rest of it and we come back and talk about it, that my opinion will have changed. Like, that is my hope. But right now,
you're skeptical.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What,
I hate that that's happening for the first time when there's no corpse, though. I will say that.
Yeah, I feel like there's a little bit of, I mean, I guess it's correlation, not causation, but.
What about you? Are you interested in continuing?
I think I'm somewhat similar in that I think there are elements of the story that didn't really grab me as much. Like I said, the beginning, I think I wasn't, like, I had to go back and re-listen to the first, 10 minutes or so, just to sort of like follow along with like, wait, why am I listening to this? Why am I hearing about this tea party?
Were you zoning out?
A little bit, yeah. A little bit. Which I think is a good warning to people who haven't listened to this yet. Like, I think it gets to a story. It just takes a little bit to get to the story. I think once we got to Keith's story, hearing about his life story, hearing about his family, hearing about how he met Juliet, like, we start to get the elements of the long con. And I think I am kind of here for a long con story. Like, I'm curious about how she plays this out, how she gets away with it for as long as she gets away with it. Like, so we're told that she's the most prolific con artist in British history, and she gets millions and millions of pounds. I'm curious to hear how she does that. I also think this is a nice kind of break from women getting assaulted and murdered. I think
Well, this is also true. It's
if you,
nice to have a break from that.
yeah, if you need a break from that, I think this is a good one.
Did it like compare? Did it like remind you of anything else
I think
notable?
so. Actually, to your point about whether you want to continue with this, one of the other ones I started and did not finish was Scamanda, which maybe we'll
I
talk
loved
about.
Scamanda.
Well, and we should probably get to that one at some point. But I think I heard that one. I didn't really find the central figures like all that relatable.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, and once I kind of figured out, okay, I get what the scam is. I kind of zoned out on that one, and I didn't listen to it all the way through. And maybe I should go back and give it another shot.
Yeah, maybe in a few murders time we can go back to that one. So for me, I don't know if you've listened to this one, but A Very British Cult.
No.
Okay, so this is like similar in theme. So it's basically all about deception. There's a lot of kind of spirituality stuff that comes into it as well. It's kind of more along the life coach vein, with spirituality brought into it. But I was hooked on that. So again, like it was a British podcast, and like it was not related to a murder, and yet like I did find it. I wanted to listen to it.
So I'm curious to hear. So, what kind of like what could happen here? Like if you were to predict what's going to happen, or like what maybe would pull you in, so that you'd come back and say like, yes, this was definitely worth listening to. I'm glad I went all the way through. Like I feel like for me, part of it is I don't want it just to be like as straightforward of a con as it could be, right? Like, and that's what I felt about Scamanda. I was like, oh, I see exactly like what the beats of this story are going to be. Like I want to be surprised by it. I want to I want there to be some real, like I was thinking about movies about con artists that I've seen, like Talented Mr. Ripley or Catch Me If You Can, the Leonardo DiCaprio one, where just like it just took a bunch of like random directions that I didn't see coming, and that was what was exciting, because like I get it, you're a con artist, like I get how the con works, but I want to be kind of surprised by it. I want to be kind of like conned along with the victim in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But what about you?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, and maybe that is why like I'm not drawn to this. I feel like maybe this is something we should do. I feel like I could write down what the next 5 episodes are going to be about. I liked that the host kind of noted like that she was her family are from India.
Yes,
I think that's what she was saying.
Hosts, yeah.
I really loved hearing that, and she was saying, you know, like making a sacrifice is like, it's like a big thing in a lot of cultures. That was really interesting, that sometimes a lot of the time women will like say shave their heads when they're trying to get pregnant, because it's like, I will sacrifice my beauty for this child. That was a really interesting tidbit. I really enjoyed that piece. Yeah. And I have a lot of respect for that kind of thing. I think there's a lot of ways that people find calmness. I feel like there's a lot of ways people find healing. And I think whatever way you can get that is really, really important. What I just found hard here was the level of going from, 0 to 90 and like, I don't know, sending your envelope with your money over to Pinterest a tree. And even the host said, like, that seems cold. Like, just cold, hard cash, please. Don't worry. Nobody's going to open your envelope. What if it rains? Is it going to disintegrate? Like, what?
Great
like,
question.
what's going to happen?
Yeah.
I mean, are the animals not going to rip it off the tree? Like,
We did hear there's going to be a monkey. That was foreshadowed. There will be a monkey. Yeah. So, all right.
I mean,
let's, we'll come back in our next episode. We'll see how right we were.
Or how wrong. Wouldn't it be great if we were wrong and we were like, this podcast is excellent,
All right, let's find out. Okay.
All right. On to our true crime question of the episode. Take it away, Jeff.
All right, Dee. So this podcast is about con artists, which is about lying. So how good of a liar are you, and how good are you at spotting a lie?
I love the first part of this question because really, if you were a good liar, would you not like lie here and be like, I'm such a terrible liar? But but I am in fact really poor at lying. I when someone it's very easy to tell if I'm lying. My cheeks go red, like I'm Irish. I've got pale skin. Like my face shows everything. I know my cheeks go red. I'm just like so shifty. I get really uncomfortable. Like, no. I over tell people stuff. I sometimes tell people too much truth. Like I need to be reined in.
What about like when you have to lie? Like what if you're like you have to say something to your kids or something like that?
Why would I lie to my kids?
I don't know. Santa Claus. There's lots of reasons.
I think I'm creative with the words I use in those situations. I mean, look, I was a primary school teacher in Ireland. I think there's situations that you need to use flowery language in certain situations. But like a straight out lie is very different to that.
Is it? I don't know. I feel like it's kind of just a variation on the same thing. Like I feel like
a lie is a lie. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, how different is lying than just acting, right? Like,
I'm a very good actress.
Well, acting.
I'm not. I'm totally joking. Acting is basically lying. It's pretending to be someone else. But I think, I don't know. It's a good point.
I feel like that's like
maybe if I feel like what you're saying to me is like, look, if you're not a good liar, you mustn't be trying that hard. That's the vibe I'm getting. Does that mean you're a really good liar when you want to try?
I think it is just a matter of sort of believing it yourself. I think the more I think there's a couple of tactics. Either you sort of disassociate from the truth, right? And you sort of emotionally remove yourself from, like, I think when you talk about your cheeks going red and all that, like, I feel like that's because you are so focused on the fact that you are telling a lie. Is that possible?
I mean, maybe. Are you saying that I might be overthinking as I'm talking? Because like that's basically every moment of my existence.
Maybe a little, yeah. But I mean, I think if you just sort of, and again, I think this is like acting. You just sort of like commit to it, and you sort of believe it yourself. Then you can kind of convince anyone. Like I feel like in terms of the second part of this question of how good are you at spotting a lie, I think it is really hard when someone is fully committed to it, but for someone like you're describing yourself who is almost like drawing attention to the fact that you're acting weird, right? Like that stands out and that's easy to spot.
I think I'm good at spotting a lie. I'm definitely very good at spotting an exaggeration.
Let's go back to with kids. How easy is it to spot when your kids are lying?
Oh my God, when my kids are lying, it's so easy. Fia cannot yet lie. Actually, she's starting to sort of learn how to lie, but I think sometimes her facts get mixed up in her head. So she's like, yeah, today this happened. And you're like, no, darling, that happened like 3 months ago. And she's like, oh yeah, today. And I'm like, cool. I
feel like with kids, there's like, they when they lie to you, they almost like look at you with like an expectancy of like, can you tell? Like, do you see that I'm lying to you?
That's exactly what my son is like. He's like the shifty eyes. He's like, no. He's like me with the red cheeks. His cheeks don't go red though, but like he's got the shifty eye. I'm like, I can tell. What about you? I feel like you didn't answer if you were a good liar. You just basically turned it back on me and said you're not trying hard enough.
I mean,
are you a good liar?
That's part of lying, isn't it? Is misdirection and
there you
sleight
go.
of hand.
There you go.
Yeah.
Go on. How good are you at spotting a lie then?
Well, okay. So I want to say pretty good, and I certainly have been able to spot it with my own children. I think at the same time, I think there are situations in which I'm incredibly naive and just want to believe whatever is presented to me. And I mean, this is similar to what we're talking about with this podcast. Like I just kind of want to get pulled in. Like I want it to carry me along. And so I think I sort of suspend my disbelief sometimes, maybe too much. So I think I'm better at doing it than spotting it. But I also I, for the longest time, I kind of subscribed to the belief of it's so not worth it to try to lie about anything important because and similar to like what we're talking about this episode of like this long con of like to sustain that over time just seems not worth the effort. Like it's just a lot of work, right? Like,
I mean, I know you're an overthinker, so like you would just overthink like the guilt and the whatever that comes with the lie if it is a big and more important thing. So
I think okay, so to use an example, when a story comes out about someone who like had a secret like second family, right? And they were lying to both that the other one didn't exist. Like that just seems so exhausting.
There's just like, how do you keep up with the schedules and the birthdays and the extracurricular activities? I'm like, seriously.
Yeah.
It's the same with an affair. I'm like, where's your energy coming from? You know, when you hear these people who have young kids who are off on having their bit on the side and you're just like, seriously, like how? Where?
It's enough just to get through the regular day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well.
Anyway.
Should we talk about what's coming up next?
Let's do it.
So in our next episode, we'll discuss the whole of Filthy Ritual.
Were our initial thoughts correct? What moments lingered? How does it all end? And of course, was this crime worth the time?
So you can listen to Filthy Ritual wherever you get your podcasts, and then join us for our full recap next time. So Much Crime, So Little Time is a production of Mind Glove Media. The executive producer is Paxton Caloriso. Our associate producer is Blythe Ty. Our theme music was composed by Vyacheslav Starostin. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this show on your podcast app. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Even better, tell your friends. To join the discussion, look for us on social media. Check out the show notes for all the links. Thanks for listening.